Hey guys, welcome back to my house. I've missed you guys. This has been a super busy week. I've been over at the school packing up our classroom and I've got to get back over there in a few minutes. But before I go, I wanted to get our chapter in for today of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. So previously on The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, when last we left off in chapter 15, we saw that Edward had been kicked off the train in the previous chapter, and he again was lost from those that he loved, from Bull and Lucy, and he had hit the bottom, his rock bottom, we would call it. He was in the depths of despair. He had no hope. He didn't care what was going to happen to him. We sometimes call, when someone is feeling like that, depression. And it's a very real feeling that people get sometimes when they feel like they have no hope and they're just in the utmost of sadness. And he just did not care. An old lady comes along, picks him up, nails him to a scarecrow post and makes him a scarecrow. Again, he doesn't care because he just has no hope. He thinks that love is probably never come his way again, and he's so sad from losing everybody that he loves. And he even feels like the stars are mocking him. But he does find hope again. We hear at the very end of the chapter and going into the next chapter of chapter 16, he meets a new little friend that he didn't expect to meet in the moment of his despair. He meets a young boy named Bryce who comes and secretly, he worked for the old lady, and he secretly sneaks him off in the middle of the night from that old scarecrow post, away from those old crows, and he takes him home with him. And that's where we're picking up today. And it said at the very end that maybe was his thought as he was being taken off, as he got that burst of freedom and a little bit of hope flushed over him again. So today, Edward's going to meet a little girl with Bryce, and you're going to hear their story, and it's kind of a sad story. So I want you to be ready to really listen hard and intently. It's kind of a serious kind of story part, and this part with this new little girl, there's gonna be some serious issues she's dealing with. So I want you to be listening for what were her issues that she's having to deal with, and how does Edward feel when she holds him. I want you to kind of connect back in your mind how Edward felt when Abilene would hold him really tight on the boat as they left from New Egypt, and how he didn't like being crumpled. And I want you to see if you see where his attitude and feelings have changed a little bit. I'm sitting outside my house today too because I thought maybe you guys would like to enjoy some fresh sunshine with me before I head to school. All right, so grab your papers and pencils, get ready to jot your thoughts as I read chapter 17 of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Here we go. Bryce slung Edward over his shoulder. He started to walk. "I come to get you for Sarah Ruth," Bryce said. "You don't know Sarah Ruth. She's my sister. She's sick. She had her baby doll made out of china. She loved that baby doll, but he broke it. He broke it. He was drunk and stepped on that baby's head and smashed it into 100 million pieces. Them pieces was so small, I couldn't make them go back together. I couldn't. I tried and I tried." At this point in the story, Bryce stopped walking and shook his head and wiped at his nose with the back of his hand. He does that a lot, if you notice so far. "Sarah Ruth ain't had nothing to play with since. He won't buy her nothing. He says she don't need nothing, and he says she don't need nothing because she ain't gonna live. But he don't know." Bryce started to walk again. "He don't know," he said. Who he was not clear to Edward. What was clear was that he was being taken to a child to make up for the loss of a doll. A doll. How Edward loathed dolls, and to be thought of as a likely replacement for a doll offended him. But still, it was, he had to admit, a highly preferable alternative to hanging by his ears from a post. The house in which Bryce and Sarah Ruth lived was so small and crooked that Edward did not believe at first that it was even a house. He mistook it instead for a chicken coop. Inside there were 2 beds and a kerosene lamp, and not much else. Now, a kerosene lamp is kind of like people used to use in the olden days before they had electricity. And it would have, and you may have used them when you've gone camping before with your families. They have like a kerosene liquid in the bottom, and you light a wick that comes up out of the lamp, and with a little bit of fire from a match or a lighter, and the kerosene goes up that wick and it keeps it burning. And so that's the only light they have in the house. Sarah, Bryce whispered. Sarah Ruth, you got to wake up now, honey. I brung you something. He took the harmonica out of his pocket and played the beginning of a simple melody. The little girl sat up in her bed and immediately started to cough. Bryce put his hand on her back. That's all right, he told her. That's okay. She was young, maybe 4 years old, and she had white blonde hair, and even in the poor light of the lamp, Edward could see that her eyes were the same gold-flecked as Bryce's. That's right, said Bryce. You go on ahead and cough. Sarah Ruth obliged him. She coughed and coughed and coughed. I hope you guys can hear me okay. The wind is picking up here at my house, so I hope it's not muffling the sound. On the wall of the cabin, the kerosene light cast her trembling shadow, hunched over and small. The coughing was the saddest sound that Edward had ever heard. Sadder even than the mournful call of the whippoorwill. Finally, Sarah Ruth stopped. Bryce said, You want to see what I brung you? Sarah Ruth nodded. You got to close your eyes. The girl closed her eyes. Bryce picked up Edward and held him so that he was standing straight, like a soldier, at the end of the bed. All right now, you can open them. Sarah Ruth opened her eyes, and Bryce moved Edward's china legs, china arms, so it looked as if he were dancing. Sarah Ruth laughed and clapped her hands. Rabbit, she said. He's for you, honey, said Bryce. Sarah Ruth looked first at Edward, and then at Bryce, and then back at Edward again, her eyes wide and disbelieving. He's yours. Mine? Sarah Ruth, Edward would soon discover, rarely said more than one word at a time. Words, at least several of them strung together, made her cough. She limited herself. She said only what needed to be said. Yours, said Bryce. I got him special for you. This knowledge provoked another fit of coughing in Sarah Ruth, and she hunched over again. When the fit was done, she uncurled herself and held out her arms. That's right, said Bryce. He handed Edward to her. Baby, said Sarah Ruth. She rocked Edward back and forth and stared down at him and smiled. You guys have probably been rocked by someone in your family, and you probably know how special that feels to be rocked and looked at with great love. Never in his life had Edward been cradled like a baby. Abilene had not done it, nor had Nellie, and most certainly Bull had not. It was a singular sensation to be held so gently and yet so fiercely, to be stared down at with so much love. Edward felt the whole of his china body flood with warmth. You going to give him a name, honey? Bryce asked. Jangles, said Sarah Ruth, without taking her eyes off Edward. Jangles, huh? That's a good name. I like that name. Bryce patted Sarah Ruth on the head. She continued to stare down at Edward. Hush, she said to Edward, as she rocked him back and forth. From the minute I first seen him, said Bryce, I knew he belonged to you. I said to myself, that rabbit is for Sarah Ruth for sure. Jangles, murmured Sarah Ruth. There's a picture of them in their little shack. So Edward's gone from basically living in a mansion to living at the bottom of the ocean to living in a garbage dump to being a traveler with no home at all. And now he's living in a little shack. Outside the cabin, thunder cracked, and then came the sound of rain falling on the tin roof. Sarah Ruth rocked Edward back and forth, and Bryce took out his harmonica and started to play, making his song keep rhythm with the rain. Did you notice what a positive spirit Bryce has, even though he's kind of pitiful? And did you notice we don't hear of any parents in the house yet? Only we've heard a little something about somebody that sounds kind of scary that broke Sarah Ruth's doll. Now, I want you to get ready to give me your answer to our question for today on our chapter. What are Sarah Ruth's issues that you're hearing? And how did Edward feel when Sarah Ruth cradled him like a baby? All right, love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow on the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. Bye.